Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a Zor, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Your host, Erik Van Horn, here today with Gary Findley. Now, if you're in the franchising world, you probably know Gary. So instead of reading a big, long bio, which I could do, I'm just going to take a crack and a stab at it and introducing him. So I've known Gary for quite a while. I knew that he was a president of Curves, blew up that brand from very little to a ton of franchisees. And then he went on to do other brands, be involved with other brands, and had some amazing exits and helped a lot of brands grow. One of them is Restoration One. He does a lot in franchise development, and he's just an all-around great guy. He's the type of guy, when you see him at some of the big franchise conferences, you see people all around him. And he's the kind of guy that you want to get to know. He has a book. It's called The Redneck CEO. It's a book that details his business journey and principles for success. He's just recently been on Undercover Boss. So I've been super excited to talk to you, Gary. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Erik. Always fun to get an opportunity to talk to you and see you again. Now when you say everyone is around me, that you left out the last part of that was there is a group around me. It's usually law enforcement, so it's typically not anything else. But it's been a fun ride. I've been doing this for 30 years. I told somebody the other day, kind of the sequence of events. I spoke at actually my alma mater at the college there, and I told them, I said, I started dating my wife in 78. We graduated in 80. We got married in 82. We had kids in 84, 86, 88. And then started Curves in 96 to 04. So during that eight year period, helping a guy, grow that thing as president of that company. We started with two. I kind of, I don't know if you'd say semi-retired, but felt like I was at the area that I felt like I developed it to and wanted to go and do other things. And so we were at 8,000 locations at that point. And I said, okay, look, I'm going to take a break. And within like 2 weeks, I got a call from actual former Curves franchisee, said, hey, we got an idea. And then I helped them. And then somebody else had an idea and somebody else. And so we started Findley Group. Before we knew it, we had about a dozen brands, from kids cooking schools to dog daycares to nanny services, you name it. We had a little bit of everything. So that career has spread out over 30 years. And so it looks like I'll be, my finish up will be Restoration One, or Stellar Brands, Restoration One, Bluefrog, driveway company, and Softroc. So moving into that position of chairman of the board, I can still have an opportunity to kind of overlook, but, sitting in board meetings and to, again, really get out there and spread the word and talk about the company, look for acquisitions, but, kind of be that back end figurehead.
What are you going to miss? What are you going to miss about what you've done? President, CEO, like development, you've done so many different things. Like, what are you going to miss in that?
I'd say the development part, that's my life. I started off in this at really the Dwyer Group. It wasn't Neighborly, in that early 80s period, I think about 2 years after we got married. So about 84, selling franchises. And that's how I learned it. That was my start. And so all of the careers, whether it was, president I started at Curves as the sales guy, and I went out and, I would, run an ad in these little small cities. I would go out, meet with the people, and I'm telling you, people don't believe me. I bet the first 20 ads I sent out, I never had, I think only once that I had more than one person show up that I met with, but I had 100% sales average. I would meet, had a little 2-page brochure, had no clubs open, no background with this. Myself and the actual founder of the company, both of us had been through bankruptcies before, so that was in our FTDs. So
that's not easy to sell around.
It is not easy to sell around, and especially in a startup. But man, I mean, I would run that ad, meet with somebody, sell it, come back to Texas, drop off Kim and the kids, go down south about 7 hours, pick up the equipment, come back, pick them up, and then go do grand openings. And I do, 3 grand openings, and then on my way back, first 3 were in Colorado. On my way back, I'd stop and do it again, run more ads until eventually, I think about 50 locations, I moved into that president role. So my entire career has been built on development. That's what I miss. And, the watching it grow, but help be part of that. And I'm still, can very well be a part of that, but more on an advisory part as opposed to being in the middle of it.
Let's talk about that. And I want to get into the Redneck CEO book, but chairman of the board. I don't think I've ever had anybody, and this is a new position for you, although you functioned in that way at different times, I would imagine. Yeah. But what are you most looking forward to as chairman of the board? And I think this is, in other words, you could be like an investor into the brand, an advisor to the brand. Just give me some of what's going on in your head about being chairman of the board.
I had the opportunity to do another podcast this morning, and it was an industry podcast, so one in the restoration industry. And what I was telling her, she was kind of asking me the same question. I said, I started these dozen businesses I've had, with the exception of fitness, because I owned several health clubs when I was, in my 20s. And so that I know well. I could sell a membership to anybody today, or I could go change the filters out in the swimming pool. So that was my background. So when I started Findley Group and I started having all these different concepts, I didn't, there's no way I could know about dog daycares and kids cooking schools and things like that. All I knew about was franchising and how to build a system around that. So, as I was telling this morning in that podcast, it is that same thing with Restoration One. Don't know the industry, didn't know the industry when I came in, but I knew how to build a company, a franchise company. And that's exactly what we did. I think it's at, with close to 300 locations, that particular brand it's really needs that seat needs to be filled with somebody that's industry specific, because now, we've built a strong system. So, now it's all about, building more systems and processes in that restoration industry, and people that have a, where they're more well-known in that. I'm more well-known in the franchise. So I just felt like it was time to do that. And Sherry had that background. She's a perfect person to sit in there. We had Tom as our president, who came from, the restoration industry as well. So that really, I went into this saying, look, I really want to spend time, doing the things I want to enjoy doing, which is being with my grandkids, working on the ranch, being out there, still kind of watching what's going on, still be part of it, but not the day-to-day operations, and not have to be that last person not have to be the decision maker. So, that's, I've done it all. That's time for somebody else to do. And so for me, it's just being able to kind of, have that 30,000 foot view on what happens with a company, and free me up. I may find other opportunities, but right now I'll spend time with the kids, being involved in other boards, mostly ministry related stuff, which is really what I enjoy doing. And so I think it's just no day to day, no decision making, and I can get I won't say I can get as involved as I want to be, because I'm better off not to be, but I can, especially on the franchise side a lot of that's just, how do you deal with a franchisee? If you haven't done it before, I've been very, very, very fortunate in the 2 major companies, really Snap, Restoration One, and Curves, not have to, very little to no litigation. And that comes with knowing how to treat franchisees, which to me, they're your bread and butter. That's what you're there for. So if you run a company where you're trying to the focus is all about the corporation making money and not be on the franchisees, that's going to be a problem. So I think step back, be able to look at it from another angle.
I like it. I like what you said about little to no litigation. That's a nice. Litigation's no fun. I have friends going through it now. I was just talking to my franchisor mastermind group that I was helping out with franchise sales, franchise development, and just talking to them about, litigation and ways to avoid it in the development process. And it's amazing how many people don't know like some of the basic things to avoid saying, and that just gets you out of trouble. But I love what you said. I mean, you just happy, successful franchisees doing the right thing for them. That's a great way to avoid litigation.
And when I left Curves, they kind of hit quite a bit of that, which I don't think we had any the whole time I was there. If we did, I don't even know of any. I don't really remember any. But when I left, they just, it was more because they didn't bring in a president immediately. And so they really kind of turned it over to legal. And the problem with that is that then every issue becomes a legal issue, right? And most of the time they're not. You can avoid that. And I pride myself on the fact that my franchisees, for the most part, have always, no matter what company, been able to get to me, reach me. Here's my cell phone. My cell phone's on my email address, so it's not hard to find. And even to this day, I still get franchisees from every brand that I've dealt with that reaches out. Hey, saw you. It is all about communication. If you can run into it or you can run away from it. I run into it, which means that, I'm going to get in front of it. I've went out and I've traveled and met franchisees before, but if you put the fire out early, it won't be a problem. But if you let that thing sizzle, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Then it becomes a problem.
Yep, that's it. And for anybody that's looking at buying a franchise right now, one of the things that you want to look at is just the franchisor's attitude towards litigation. If they have a big old legal team, bigger than their operations team, it might give you some hints on what they think about it.
That could be a sign. Yeah.
A lot of other soft ways to do it, but some brands really are proud of their litigation. And some brands want to avoid it and are much more relational. So that's a side note. Hopefully that saves somebody some headache. So we were getting on, and before we hit record, I said, "What are you up to?" And you're like, "I just got off the tractor." And if you're watching this, you'll see you got some deer heads behind you with some birds on the wall, and you just got off the tractor. So the title of the book is The Redneck CEO. And you're living it, man. Tell us about the book. Tell us about a bit of your background, the title of the book and all of that.
The title, interesting enough, is that, and you can appreciate this, you've been developing a long time as well. One of my development guys called me one day and said, "Hey, I have a prospect up in the Northwest, and they read an article," and this was really before it came out a lot. We just started talking about it. And said, I don't know what it's like down where you guys are at, but that's not a very good title here, and don't know that I'd want to be part of the company. And I said, great, we don't want them as part of the company, because where I come up with that, I grew up in a small town, 23 people in my graduating class. I married one of them, 40 years ago this year, and I was the town. I was related to somebody on every street. So three streets going this way, three streets going this way. My dad was on the school board. My dad was on the water board. My dad coached baseball. My dad was a deacon at the church. And if the church was open, we were there. And to me, I had a great childhood, and it was one of those things where when we got home, from school, I literally got on my horse and took off across town. I rode my horse to school one day. And so redneck being a term of kind of people that really are just, down to earth, hard workers. I worked on ranches, I did farming. And those are the kind of things that really, those are the things that made me who I am today, which is that loyal. Kim will say, sometimes I'm loyal to a fault. That's probably true. It's not, and Sometimes it's been reciprocated, sometimes it's not. But the book says, talks about faith, hope, and hard work. I mean, that's really the story of my life. And the people in this city, we weren't, we did fine. My dad owned, he was an entrepreneur. He owned a stereo business. So I learned quite a bit from him. But the people in town, it was just, you don't see it today. It's the Mayberry. Everybody knew everybody, you certainly wouldn't get, I certainly wasn't going to be able to get away with anything with everybody knowing who I was, but it's just a great time to grow up. And so to me, that redneck is kind of, I enjoy being on a tractor much more than I do in a boardroom. I don't like meetings. I don't like sitting in meetings. And so my style has always been hire the right people, leave them alone, don't micromanage. And that has worked for me to the tune of 10,000 franchises. So, I think that it's been, I treat it more as a term of endearment myself. And I kind of wear that with a badge of honor that I think that, I told somebody that we were, if you can picture you're a ranch farm boy, cowboy, as well.
I'm more of a fake one. Like I've got tractors, but I don't even know what they are. If you were to say, what tractor is that? I know I have a John Deere, but I don't know what model it is. But so I'm almost there.
Well, hey, all that matters is that it's got a cab on it. That's all that matters.
And it does. And it does.
There you go. Well, when I was growing up, I was always the guy that had to get out and open the gates. And it was always, the guy I worked for had crappy equipment. And so what I was telling somebody is that, you could be out at 2:00 in the morning by yourself, 15 years old. You're in a field on a tractor, it breaks down. You can't Google it. You can't YouTube it. You can't call anybody. And you're probably already on the other side of the field. You're, half a mile from your car, way out in the woods, which you don't know what's out there. So you have to learn to operate on the fly. You have to learn to, be able to make things work with what you got in front of you. It just taught me how to not depend on other people. So when I was younger, I had a cow. I took her, I showed her at the FFA shows for people who know what that is, and groomed and took care of her. So taking care of animals does a lot. I had probably a horse since I was 5 or 6, but it's I did say though that when I grew up and I made it, the two things: I would never open a gate again by hand, and I would never have a tractor without a cab. So I've got the cab, and every gate you have to go through of mine has electric gates on them. So
you can just open it from the cab of the tractor,
the cab of the tractor, cab of the car, whatever. I don't get out. Right, man.
I hate opening gates. I hate opening gates.
Yep, I did too. And back in the day, I never saw a gate. I can tell you, I never grew up with a gate, like a metal gate that you go up and you got a little chain and pull back. They were made from the barbed wire. And so you have to loop your hand around this way and
to get leverage. That's how you got leverage,
and then close it. That was the gates of the 70s.
Wow. That is the gates of the 70s. I have one of those gates of the 70s on my property that I opened up hiking with the girls a couple days ago. I'm like, girls, they're like, what are you doing, Dad? I'm like, I'm opening up the gate. Then they were just fascinated by this gate that went into Forest Service property, but you're absolutely right. So I do. I'm more of a rancher than I give myself credit for, I guess.
Yeah, okay. You can be, you could call it a drugstore cowboy. That's what some people.
So you made a comment earlier about basically, it reminded me of a comment that Richard Branson told a friend of mine. He's basically said, you just leave the building. You start a business, and then you just leave the building, both figuratively and metaphorically. Like you'll just leave the building. So you're kind of talking about that and the things that you've built. So dive into that a little bit more, like the not being the expert. You know what you're good at and know what you're not good at. So how do you get good at just leaving the building?
But it goes back to what the other thing I said was hiring the right people. if you have trust in the people that you have there, you trust that they know what they're doing, you trust that they know the job well, and understand, I hired people that knew the industry, and I hired people that were, they understood it. So for me, it's easy to be able to do that when you've turned it over to the right person. I mean, I know that sounds a little cliche, but it really is. You got that right person in the seat, which says you can walk away with confidence. And I don't know that I've ever, there's probably certain things, maybe something going on that, certain projects or something, you may feel like, okay, I got to, stick my toe in this. If I do, it's always going to be a development project. I will tell you that. It's never going to be an operational project. But yeah, find the right people, put them in place, let them go. You're going to get more done. I would say one of the biggest compliments I've had. So, my son, Micah, works with me, as you've met Micah, and his longtime friend, Jay. They grew up together. They started in high school, they started a lawn mowing business. And when we first started Restoration One, they were the guys out doing the development, not development. I was doing development. They were doing operations. And he calls me one day, I think we're out of town, and he says, hey, and he called me Gary. It was Gary from, 8 to 5. After that, it was Dad. But he says, hey, what, we've got this situation. We don't know what to do about it. He had on speakerphone, and I paused for a minute. I said, guys, figure it out. You know what? Figure it out. You're smart, you're intelligent. That's what I hired you for. And he will still tell that story today. That he said, they hung up, and of course they panicked, but then they said, okay, let's figure it out. One of my favorite scenes, I think it's in Apollo 13, where they're stuck and they're trying to figure out how's he going to get back. And so they all get together and they come up and they bring in a box, and that box has all the things that is actually on the capsule. How do we take these things and make what he needs? Well, it's the same thing. When you get pushed in a corner, you're going to have to figure it out. And after Micah, he read my book. He said, hey, I started reading it last night. I couldn't put it down. I read it, and he said, I knew all these things went on, and I knew about them. I had no clue to the extent of them, had no clue to the extent of how they, change your life, which in turn changed their life. So, walk away if you got the right people. If you don't, you're going to have to be thinking about it.
What's your management style?
I would say it's certainly relational. So at Curves, let's say I had, 200 employees there at the office. I knew each one. I knew who they were married to. I knew how many kids they had. I went to employees' kids' baseball games before, went to their birthday party. So relational, and by that you build that trust. My management style is not meetings. I don't like them because if you go back to what I said, if you hire those really good people that know what they're doing, and now you try to take those people and you set them in meetings when they're so much more productive, letting them do what I'm not going to say you never have them. And, the company today and the direction that it's going, it does require, it requires more of a management style than it does a relational style. But I'll say this much. I mean, I just retired. She had a lady that was kind of our, front desk, we call her our air traffic controller. She was kind of in the little things. And she retired with us probably 3-4 months ago. And here's the fun part about that. She was my first employee at Curves.
No way.
So she started with me, she left with me.
That's
and
awesome.
When she started with me, when she came in and interviewed, she was my first employee. She came in and I interviewed her, and she left, came back the next day. I said, well, what do you think? Because I offered her the job. And she said, well, I went home and told my husband. He said, this sounds like some fly-by-night company, but you know what? I need a job. And eventually he came to work for me. Her daughter came to work for me. Her son came to work for me. Her husband, sadly enough, actually retired there, and retired in 2 months late, a month later, had cancer and was passed away within 2 months of retiring. But he put his whole life into it. But I actually walked her down the aisle, so very much about that relational. But we're at a point now to where that's got to change, it's got to shift.
What are you bad at? Like, what are some of the, we all have our weaknesses and things that, you're bad at meetings. I know that.
Yeah.
What are you bad? What would you say like your own weaknesses are? Things that you don't like doing?
I got to think about how to say this. I don't really like structure to that, and again, when you grew up the way I grew up, you have to improvise. So you don't need to, put together a 10-point PowerPoint to decide that you got to do one thing. So I don't do that well. I'm not a very patient person. I just like getting things done. So I don't like sitting around talking about it. That's probably that is what I don't do well.
At what point does an organization, do you grow like us as founders and in organizations like that are action takers? And most of us entrepreneurs are like that. At what point does an organization outgrow us? Or does it? This is because I think the reason I ask, because there's a lot of people that are sitting in seats that they probably need to move out of, but they don't want to. Mm-hmm. They don't have enough self-awareness to be able to do it.
Well, and when they don't, most of the time they don't trust the people they have there. So, I mean, they don't feel good enough to hand it off. No, I think you do. I think you certainly grow out of it. I mean, Curves was the same thing, and I knew it. I knew it. It's different about knowing it and doing it. Because I mean, I'm not going to say this. I'll let you look at it when you read the book, because in the book I talk about. It was one of the greatest jobs I've ever had, best 8 years I've ever had, and from a country boy that did not go to college to be able to make 7-figure incomes for numerous years and walk away with that. It was a great run. I loved it, but I recognized a time to the point. So what you're saying and how I would answer that, it's when the company makes a shift. Curves was making a shift, and we started in the 90s when women didn't mind working out with men. It was more of a community environment. So it wasn't so much, kickboxing, HIT workouts. It was a community, but they were getting results, and most of them had not worked out before. You moved into when you get into the 21st century, you're now into a situation to where they don't mind working out with men. They like harder workouts. They grew up more at college working out, and so that shift happened. And I knew that was not going to be my forte. It's the same thing with Restoration One. Like I told you earlier, is that, we've built it on a strong foundation, put the systems, processes, got great franchisees, which is really what's built it. And so now it needs to be more industry specific. What do you do to continue to grow in the industry? Because, I tell franchisees all the time, look, my model's easy. I make money when you make money. So I need to be thinking every day, how do I drive revenue to you? If you do that, development just happens. That. I mean, if your company's successful, you don't have to go look for people. They'll come to you. And so that's, to me, when you know that you've outgrown your skill set, then it's time to move on.
I like that. Well said. Let's talk about Undercover Boss.
Yep. So, I mean, very, very great. It was a great opportunity to get to find out if my franchisees, you train them, you teach them, you put them out there, and you hope they're doing what you taught them, right? You hope that they're passionate about what they're doing. You hope that they're treating customers well, and so this show gave me that opportunity to find that out and to get on the front lines and be out there and do jobs and understand what they go through on a day-to-day basis. And for me, I walked away from that just incredibly proud of what these franchisees are doing. They are, I would clearly say this has been one of the best group of franchisees I've ever had in my history of franchising. They're passionate about what they do. I got to watch their passion of dealing with customers. And so being on those front lines, what do they run into on a day-to-day basis? And so, I had some jobs that were, a lot nastier than I thought they would be. But I really had a good time. I really did. It was fun. It's long, probably the hardest thing for me is, I get mic'd up first thing in the morning. And so, I'll have a tendency to forget that I'm mic'd up during the day. So, that could be
any good stories. I want to hear a good story about that.
That could not be good. I have a couple, but I probably shouldn't talk about them.
Offline. I like that.
We'll do about the offline maybe.
When you did, like, how long did you record? Like, how many days were you recording? And was it all back to back?
It was all back to back. Well, we recorded quite a bit. They had different groups come down to Waco. We did quite a bit at the ranch. We did quite a bit at the office. And then we came back to the ranch when we started to put together the reveal. And so that's where we kind of did all that. So we would travel. I mean, we filmed from 6 a.m. till 9, 10 o'clock at night, every day. And so we'd have a day of travel, then we'd have a day of shooting, a day of travel, a day of shooting. So, and then the last one was in Denver, where we did our final reveal, with the employees that I went out on the road with. So it was a lot of hours and a lot of filming that gets shoved into about, 45 minutes or so. And and I told somebody, most people didn't know, I saw this when the rest of the world saw it. I did not get a preview. So that was a little nerve-wracking. And after I got it, I thought it could, if I sat down and put it together myself, I'm positive I would not have done as good of a job. They did an amazing job on editing and putting those pieces together. It's funny, watching it. I sit back and look and go, man, how did they do that? But yeah, it gives you, it's fun to do. It's fun to check that box, in my career, especially as I'm, winding down. So that in the book was kind of the last things. And again, and it put us on the map. You have 3.5 million people watching that show who now know Restoration One and Bluefrog and Driveway Company and Softroc.
What was like, looking back on it, how would you just describe that in a sentence? Like, just the value that brought to your brand. Just like getting out of Undercover Boss and get all that, but just like the value of that PR. So taking off the experience hat, but just people that are thinking about that or see things through that light. Like, what's the value that brings?
Yeah, I think number one, exposure. That's the biggest value it brings. But in that exposure, it showed that we are a very solid company. We're we really do care about our employees. We really do care about our customers. We're professional at what we do. And it's not just a job. And so to me, those are the things that it really put out there. It showed a lot of diversity in the company, which I just thought was amazing, that we create opportunities for a lot of different people out there. It brought to light. We actually were able to use this to be able to start a women in the industries group to hopefully encourage and bring in more women into the industry, into the trades. And so I think that was the biggest part.
What is one thing that was impactful to you that didn't make it on the show?
I don't know. I would say it was probably a line. In that line was one of the guys that was there. It was the emotion he had, it was Conde, the guy on there from Dallas. There was more to that than what we had. So it was emotionally draining that last day to be there, to go through that. I mean, that was to the point to where, we got done shooting that. I just had to get up. I said, I gotta have some time, guys. It was much more emotional draining than I thought it would be.
What would you, for somebody, a franchisor that is not able to go on Undercover Boss, but wants to have some of the learnings from it, not the exposure, but the learnings, what would you advise them to do?
I think I would say probably, if you can't do that, find a different way to be in touch with your franchisees and to be able to find out how they're doing and what their needs are. I mean, a lot of franchise companies have those checks and balances. Some don't. And I think those are important because I think the comments I made is when I need to know, I think I said, I need to know now. If things aren't going right, I need to know now, not down the road. So I would say big part, listen to your franchisees.
How do you do that though? How would you do that? Let's say you are not an Undercover Boss, but you know the value of it. Like, how do you go and listen to them? Is it sending out secret shoppers? Is it sending in trusted friends and advisors to go in and look at this kind of stuff? Is it going yourself in a different way, that kind of like how you did it, but without the cameras? Like, how would you, how would you do it?
I think it would be me personally, getting out there. So you're at the top, you're understanding what's going on. And I think you do that through, obviously, Restoration One just had their national conference, and that got them in front of people. But one of the things that Sherry and Tom put in place is a lot of these regional events, and getting people to those regional events. To me, that's really the way, because you get there and you get focus groups, and you have to somehow be in front of them, and it can't be on a Zoom. I mean, Zooms are fine, and they help, but at some point in time, you got to hop on a plane and get in front of them. And most of the time, it is, I've been fortunate that the whatever 6 conventions I've been to of Restoration One, I've never had anybody come up to me and say, in my past and some of the other companies, you go to a conference and it was just, you're lambasted the entire time that you're there, and people are all the problems they have. That's never happened here. So I think that communicating with your franchisees, getting in front of your franchisees, but it's important on those face-to-face. Most of the time, I tell people that, you got kind of 3 parts of bottom third, middle third, and upper third. And that bottom third, or the top third, are the ones that are doing, they're doing everything right. They're making money, but they still want to hear from you. So you can't set them off, to the side, even if it's just once a month, phone call, whatever. The ones in the middle that are really trying to make that next level, you're talking to those guys every couple of weeks, and you probably spend more time with those, right? And then you have the one at the bottom third that most of the time, in my opinion, if they're in that bottom third, they're not following the system, or they're not passionate about what they're doing. But those people you got to be talking to weekly, but you can't ever be in a situation where you don't talk to a franchisee, no matter how well they're doing.
Man, this is so good. Like, I'm just hearing you say this. I'm replaying conversations that I've had with my franchisor mastermind and some different Zors that I've been talking to, and like what you're saying is so good. So I hope some of the franchisors out there are listening to this and want to start implementing some of the stuff. And it's not too late. Like, the best Zors, the top franchisees are going to be the top no matter what, but you still need to talk to them. They want that. They don't want you to get in their way. They're going to be successful with or without you, but they want that relationship. Any other last bits of wisdom? Well, anything from the book or the show that you want to talk about, and feel free to tell people how to find the book and find the show. And then I've got a last question for you.
Yeah. So the book is The Redneck CEO. You can go on Amazon, you can go on Prime, and be able to get that book. It's now, we just put out the hard back as well. The idea behind the book is to be able to say that your background or where you came from does not always dictate to you what your future looks like. And you can, it's really, it's kind of, again, a little cliche, but you know what, you set that direction. And you have to put have good people out there with you, but it's about that, where you're coming from, being able to, and face adversity. What I've been there when, a truck pulled up to put my car on the back of it and haul it off. But I didn't have time. I had 3 kids, didn't have time to sit down and kind of just wallow in my own misery. I had to just keep moving. And so it's that. And then it goes into kind of the franchising, because my history is franchising and how I've built those franchise companies, what's made them successful, what I feel is a great management style. And so, and then little tidbits of things that you can do along the way. The show was just a great learning experience that you get to really be out there and see it in real time. And there's nothing, I don't care what people think, there's nothing scripted about that show. There's nothing, I didn't have scripts, I didn't know where I was going every day. I was not told until I got there. I didn't know who I was meeting, what franchisee I was meeting with, what the job was going to be. None of that information. So everything was, right on the spot. So I had to figure it out. So I think it's rare that people do get that opportunity to do that. So if you don't, and you're a franchisor, get in front of your franchisees, make sure you know what's going on out there in the system, and make sure you hire really, really, really strong people.
So I wanted to ask you about that too, about just like how authentic is that show. So as we watch your episode and other episodes, it's good to know like just kind of how authentic it is.
It is. It's not, there's nothing scripted about it. It's true to life. And nobody recognized me, my franchisee, but it was all employees. And I've not met those employees, so they wouldn't know anyway. If you did not get a chance to watch the show, it's on Paramount Plus. You got to go back and watch it, season 11, because there's some great point. Matter of fact, I think I went with 4 different people, and pretty much all 4 of them said they would, I would not make it in that job. So based on my response, not on my work. I mean, work, I could get the work done, but based on my responses to things. Right. So
I love it.
Good thing I have a job.
Exactly. The job of chairman of the board. So, empathy. I would imagine that it may have given you a new appreciation, different appreciation, or different perspective of empathy. Just in general, as a person, as a parent, as a grandparent, or as a boss, or franchisee, franchisor. So any thoughts on the word empathy that you learned about yourself, or something that was new that you kind of went deeper into it?
Yeah, I don't know that was and I think that goes back to how I grew up. Empathy was a big thing. So, we surrounded people when something happens. I mean, I can cry at the drop of a hat, so I think empathy for me, for people, is a real easy one. That's not easy for everyone. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, you become real hard, and everything's about business. And it's just not true. That will bite you in the rear at some point if everything is driven around business and not be empathetic to the situations. If I find out something's going on with my franchisees, hey, so-and-so's, spouse has cancer, I want to reach out, as much as I can, if I know it. I want to be there, if I can, lift people up in prayer, I want to be able to do that. So empathy to me is that last piece, or that major piece, that makes you a very, very good CEO. I've worked for both kinds. I've worked for a kind that is all about the money. They could care less about anything else, and they'd run over people to get there. that is later in life, though, that at some point that catches up with you, unfortunately.
Gary, I can't say that any better. Thanks for coming on the show, my friend.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I guess I'll see you soon, right? Just a couple of shows coming up. So
heck yeah.
Yeah. But I appreciate it. Anytime I can help, let me know.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.